Welcome to our webinar, everyone, a guide to building and assessing the QEP with faculty. We're really glad that you're here with us today. To start, I just had a couple of really quick housekeeping items. My name's Amber Malinovsky. I am the Director of Interactive Content here at Weave, and I'm the one who's been sending you all the emails and inviting you. Thank you very much for coming. First, I wanted to let you know that we are recording the session. So if you had any colleagues today who couldn't make it or someone who you think might be interested, we can share that with you after. It takes about a day to get it posted. We are going to start with a couple of polls in just a moment, and so I'll put those up in just a minute. Just asking you a couple questions so we can get to know you since we can't actually see or hear you. If you have questions during our session today, there is a panel area on your GoToMeeting control area, and it says questions, and you can pose those questions, you can type them, and I'll be moderating those. So if I can answer them individually, whether those just be technical questions or anything else, I'll help with that. And if you have a question for Dr. Paredes, our presenter, I will be moderating those after she's finished with her presentation. After the questions, I will do a really quick 5 to 10 minute overview of the Weave software platform. So if that was something that you were hoping to see when you signed up today, I'll go over that just really briefly. And then after the session closes, there will be a survey, and your feedback really shapes the kinds of sessions that we can provide and what types of resources you find valuable. So if you could complete the survey, we'd really appreciate it. And now, without further ado, let me introduce our presenter. Dr. Tisha Paredes started in institutional research and assessment at Old Dominion University in 2005 as a graduate assistant, and she is now the Assistant Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness and Assessment at Old Dominion. She has extensive experience working with faculty and staff on assessment, SACS accreditation, and general education. I've known Tish for quite a while, and I think my two favorite things that I've learned from her are her culture-changing friend of assessment term that has really encouraged positive culture and productivity on campus. I use that phrase all the time. And also a wonderful presentation that she has given before on using grades as assessment, and that's another one of my favorites. So we're so excited that she agreed to present here today and share about Old Dominion's successful QEP process. And so with that, I will be quiet and turn it over to her. And probably the first thing I should do, though, is start our polls.
Oh.
If that sounds good, Tish, but go ahead and welcome.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar. I know you're very busy, so taking an hour out of your day, I really appreciate. There are a couple of polls that Amber will put up just so we kind of get a read of who's out there. I'm not used to doing webinars. I like to see people and see their reactions. So if you could just select, the first poll should be up, and it says in progress. So if you could just select your responses for the first poll so we get an idea of who you are and who's out there. And then Amber, I can't actually see the poll, so if you could just tell me.
You bet. So we're wanting to know what your role is at your institution, and right now we've got almost 90% that have responded. So we'll leave it open just a couple more seconds in case some people are just coming in. I love it. Everyone is paying attention. We have almost everyone voting. That's great.
Nice.
Okay. And now I'm going to share those so everybody can see them. So we have 34% of you are faculty, 28% are staff, 21% administration, 36% assessment and IE directors, and 23% are QEP leads or directors. And they could select more than one also.
Okay. So we've got a nice representation here. My guess is that the QEP and assessment, all of you are very interested in how to assess this large project, and we will get to that. Our second poll, I believe, is where you're at in the stage.
Where are you at with your QEP?
Yeah, where you're at with your QEP. So if you could select your responses there, and we have a nice range of people, so that's good.
Give everybody just a few more moments. People aren't as excited to answer this one.
Sometimes it's hard to determine what stage you're at when you're living it.
That's very true. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share these results. Split almost down the middle.
Oh.
47% planning, 47% implementation, and 6% haven't thought about it yet.
Okay, well, actually, all of you are in a very good stage for this presentation, because I think you can learn something throughout the presentation and hopefully adapt it or adopt it to your campus. So let me actually close this. There we go. So we are here to learn about building and assessing the QEP, and as Amber introduced me, I'm the Assistant Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness and Assessment. I want to also give a huge shout out to Ramika Bingham-Risher. She is the Director of Writing and Faculty Development, or the QEP Director. She has taken this initiative from literally the 75-page document that we submitted to SACs to a real life, real living thing. So you can check out her Wix site, and that actually has all of the data, the assessment data, and all the information about what's going on with the QEP, our faculty development workshops, faculty videos, action project grants, all of that good stuff. So if you need it, and our rubric, so it's all there for anybody to adopt or adapt. There is no plagiarism in assessment. So a good assessment person starts out with what participants will be able to do at the end of this webinar. And really we're looking at obstacles and challenges to developing the QEP. I'm going to give a brief overview of that, discuss strategies for continuous engagement during each stage of the QEP, talk about an assessment plan. I'll tell you about our assessment plan at ODU, and hopefully you can get some tidbits for your campus. And then at the end, you should be able to leverage some strategies for your home institution. I'm going to start out a little bit with some context. In 2012, we were reaffirmed, and we had no recommendations at all on anything. We came out scot-free of our decennial. We didn't have to do any follow-up reports or anything like that. One of our biggest accomplishments, though, is not only that, but no recommendations on the QEP portion as well. And we really believe that these 4 points were why we didn't have no recommendations. We had clear faculty involvement throughout the whole process, and I'll outline that for you. We recognize that faculty have to be involved in student learning. We gave them the tools to do that. And we also made sure that it just wasn't one more thing to faculty. We were really, really conscious with this phrase, not overly burdensome. There will be some burden, but not overly burdensome. And we really think that helped us make a case as to why this initiative was something to improve student learning. ODU is a large, complex institution. We have just about 25,000 enrollments, graduate and undergrad, depending on when you take the census, give or take a few hundred here and there. We have over 100 undergrad, graduate, degree programs, plus certificate programs across 7 different colleges, and that's online and face-to-face, so it's very complex, a lot of moving parts, and we have over 1,300 full and part-time faculty. So that's a lot to think of when you're talking about an initiative to improve student learning. And it's got to touch the majority of students, right? It's got to have the majority of the campus involved. So first, just so we're on the same page, what's a QEP? Literally, somebody asked me this one time, what is a QEP? And I have never forgotten that. We should all know what a QEP is, but just real quickly, I want to point out here, this is the current SAC standards. The areas that I highlighted really speak to an institutional process that focuses on assessing student learning or supporting student learning. It also, in the standard, talks about the capability to implement a large initiative, and it has to have broad-based involvement, and again, you see that assessment again. So essentially, a QEP is a change, right? It is going to change something on your campus, or it should. It's intended to, and that's okay. But sometimes with change comes a little bit of resistance. And before we talk about building and assessing the QEP, I want to just give kind of a little bit of information about change strategies. We recognize when we started building our QEP in August 2010, I believe, summer of 2010, that this was going to be a change, that people were already talking about, oh, one more thing that we have to do, or how is this going to help, Tisha? You know, we're just putting in money to something. This is not really going to affect anything. And we really had to think about how we unveiled this and how we leverage different change strategies. And so none of these change strategies are mutually exclusive. You have to use them at different points in time. The first one, rational empirical, is the one that we always use, right? If we give people enough information, they will change because of their own self-interest. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. Some will, but not always. Not all people change because they have the information. The power coercive is my least favorite. It's the stick part of the stick and carrot change strategy. It's not something that I like to employ, and if you don't want to create a sustained change, use this strategy. Because as soon as SACS goes away or as soon as something else comes along, your initiative will not be sustainable if you use this strategy. However, recognizing that sometimes used in limited ways can be effective. And lastly, the normative change strategy is creating basically a new normal for people, a new set of values. People are social, and the theory on this is that they want to be in the in-group. So if everybody's doing it, I want to do it too. I call this sometimes healthy jealousy. So all three of these strategies you have to really think about and be purposeful. And it impacts, again, not only the change you want to create, but the sustainability as well. And that's just something I wanted to start off with, because with change comes resistance. And we have to think about why people are resisting, plan a strategy, so leveraging our change strategies, and then think about how to engage faculty in the change. We just don't do this to people, right? We do this with people. And so we have to think about, why are people resistant to change? And here's a list here. I am sure you can write down about 4 or 5 others that I am missing. But, you know, one of the biggest things that I have learned is lack of knowledge or not understanding. And sometimes we forget, like, especially if we're in the assessment world, we know this, right? We know what outcomes are. We know what student learning assessment is. We know we know, what rubrics are. We know SACs. We know all this terminology. 90% of the people on your campus don't, and it's intimidating. And so really just being transparent and being open to communication about what is it you're doing and why, and not using the jargon, either the SACS jargon or the assessment jargon, really helps minimize that resistance. So first you want to really think about, if you're planning your QEP, or if you're thinking about your QEP, or in the development stage of your QEP, you really want to think about what are the sources of resistance and what change strategy can you use to overcome that. One of the things about engaging faculty is that you have to really be purposeful when building your teams. And for those of you who read Gladwell's Tipping Point, you'll recognize these terms: mavens, connectors, and salespeople. When we built our QEP development team, just developing the topic, we were very, very purposeful of who we wanted on there. I think it was a 12 to 14 person team. So I believe there were 2 representatives from each college and then a couple administrators on there as well. The QEP chair is extremely important here. This has to be a person that's a faculty member who can transcend their discipline, right? who is not necessarily administrator, but really understands the classroom. We selected somebody who was a full professor and had been here for 20 years and was known and loved really across campus. In addition to that, her co-chair at the time was the AVP for Institutional Research and Assessment, my former boss. And they co-chaired the committee, and I was their support person. I was on the committee as well as the Senior Research Associate for Assessment at the time. And what that did was that we, the assessment people, became the staff of the chair, of the faculty member. If she wanted a meeting called, if she needed handouts, if she needed to navigate the bureaucracy of the university, we were there. We did it. But also, we were always mindful of the institutional data, the institutional history, the assessment data we could gather, and how to structure this with an assessment lens. So it's really, really, this is very, very critical, building your development team. And then we also found people who were mavens who could make change happen through information and ideas. Basically, these are the people that know the data. These are the people that can gather a lot, that have a lot of information. So these are institutional research, assessment people, or even researchers in student learning or some type of pedagogy. Connectors, they're exactly what it sounds like. They're the people that know a lot of people, right? You know that faculty member that just knows a lot of people outside of his or her discipline. And they're the people you want them to feed the information to, so they can start talking to a bunch of other people about the initiative. They can spread the word for you. So you don't have to be that extrovert. You don't have to be that salesperson. And then lastly is the salesperson. And these are not, again, mutually exclusive either, but you can start to identify people on your campus that fit kind of these characteristics, and engaging them in the development or the implementation of the QEP, I promise you, will make your life easier, because they will do a lot of the talking for you. Remember, this has to be led by faculty. It should be led by faculty, developed by faculty, and really impact student learning. And so having these faculty on your team that fit these characteristics will really help you in the long run. It'll go to sustainability too. We still have people that were on the original 2010 team that talk about the QEP and still like to be involved. So that's always nice as well. So enough of you know, that kind of stuff, theories and all of that. What I really want to get into is what I see as the four distinct changes, or four distinct stages of building and then implementing the QEP. So first we'll talk about development and topic selection. I know some of you are probably well into this stage, but I just want to kind of let you know what we did here, and also I want you to note the timelines. These were very discrete, focused, sometimes really short turnaround times that we had. We did not want to overly burden faculty. We did not want to have you know, a 3-year committee where nobody ever gets off, it seems like sometimes. We wanted to be very purposeful and say, this is your time commitment. And so we gathered our faculty development team. We had the first few meetings, we had a lot of internal data from IR and assessment, you know, gen ed assessment, program assessment, program reviews, the IR data that gets submitted to SHEV, degree enrollments, all of that stuff was presented. And then what we did is we put a survey out to the ODU community, to faculty and staff and students, and actually employers of ODU students, and we asked them what area of student learning needs to be improved. And really what we were asking is, we wanted them to identify their pain. And this will resonate with a lot of faculty. What is your pain in the classroom? What is it that just, you know, students aren't getting, and it's just so painful for you sometimes when you're reading that research paper or you're listening to an oral presentation? That's what we were asking, to identify your pain. And then we went on a listening tour. We had some public forums to talk about identifying people's pain. And it was fascinating. Once you reframe the question that way, what is it that you're not getting out of students that you would like to? Or frankly, what is painful for you in the classroom? People are fairly candid and really open up, and you can really hear a lot of great thoughts about how they want to improve student learning or what areas of student learning need to be improved. We had these short topic idea forms, and sorry, I took a drink there. These topic idea forms were just kind of like a few questions of what needs to be improved and how would you do it. It was just a couple of simple questions. There are so many smart people on campus. You can really get a lot of great ideas from just those two questions. And then lastly, the AACNU, the American Association of Colleges and Universities national data, point to a lot of areas of student learning that need to be improved. And then we had internally employer and alumni surveys that we could leverage, but there are also national surveys or state surveys that are done that you can leverage as well. So then moving forward, so remember that was August 2010 to October 2010. Moving forward from November to January, we did a lot in a little time. And there was a reason for this. It was extremely purposeful. We asked the community to develop mini proposals. These were 10-page proposals on an area of student learning that needed to be improved. We had a series of questions. What needs to be improved? What's the rationale? How would you do it? Those kinds of questions. And we offered a $100 stipend for submitted proposals. We ended up getting 11 full proposals out of that. Again, remember, in a short amount of time, the call went out like end of October, beginning of November, and we asked for them before the before we went on holiday break in December. We wanted to make a decision. I'm sorry, that was actually a 3-week turnaround, so we only had a 3-week turnaround there. Then we invited faculty to do full proposals. We looked at those 10 or 11 mini proposals, and we said, communication's a theme, critical thinking's a theme, reasoning's a theme. Let's put these faculty together in teams, and let's see what they can do. And the full proposals were about 20 pages. I think we had a cap of 20 pages, and they were more detailed, right? And we offered a $500 stipend for those proposals. And again, a quick turnaround. We wanted those before we went on holiday break in December, because we wanted to turn around, and in January when we came back, we wanted to open up with celebrations and conversations to talk about the topic we selected. And the topic we selected came from these proposals. So if you think about the funnel, we cast our net pretty wide, right? We had institutional data, and we had this kind of open-ended survey, what area of student learning needs to be improved. And then we narrowed down and we said, okay, these topic ideas, give me one page on what area needs to be improved and why. And then from there we narrowed down and said, okay, these are the general 5 or 6 areas that we're seeing. Let's have a mini proposal, 10-page mini proposal on these 5 or 6 areas. Then we saw some themes, and we said, okay, these look like the 3 themes: communication, critical thinking, reasoning, research, I think was another one. We invite you to write full proposals, and then at the end we chose one. So just think of it as a funnel. At the end we got one topic. And our topic was improving disciplinary writing. You see it there at the bottom of the screen. And so in January, we turned around and we came back and we unveiled the topic. And then we said, okay, we've got the topic, but now we need to know how to improve it, because we didn't really have a clear idea of how to improve it, even though we had asked for it. Nobody really had come up with that one idea. We were all kind of still trying to figure this out. So we decided to change our team. As we now go into the next stage, the design stage of the QEP, we've got our topic. It's improving disciplinary writing. Well, at the time it was just writing. We looked at our team. We had been together from August 2010 to January 2011, that was, a healthy commitment for some faculty, a little over a semester. We decided to shake it up a little bit. We invited some faculty to stay. We invited some to leave, and we all have those on committees, no matter how purposeful you are at building your committee. Some could be invited to leave, but we needed content experts, right? The chair of our committee was is a sociology professor, criminal justice professor. She wasn't a content expert in writing. So we brought on some English faculty to help us with this. We brought on some faculty development people. I talked about the assessment people, but also faculty development people. How do we improve student learning? And we broke up in 3 distinct subcommittees, and they had discrete tasks. Again, look at the timeline here, February to April, very short turnaround, very discrete tasks. We had a research/literature review committee. We had an assessment committee. And at this point, we decided that faculty development was the way to improve student learning, specifically in writing. We had heard faculty's pain that they didn't know how to teach writing, that students weren't writing well, but faculty weren't always sure, how to direct them. And when we're talking writing, we're talking also reasoning and critical thinking too, synthesis and analysis. It's not just grammar and syntax. So we decided that faculty workshops and project grants were the way to go to give faculty the tools to do this. But we needed somebody to build that, so we had a team, a subcommittee to do that. Again, listening to faculty's pain, listening to what they wanted changed, and responding to them. That's the biggest thing. I can tell people, my heartache and my pain, but if nobody's going to respond, then I think nobody really is listening to me. And for these types of projects, these large projects that require a lot of resources, you want to make sure that you're responding to faculty and giving them the tools they need. And so whether yours is a student support type thing like advising or career management or internships or something like that, e-portfolio, or it's more faculty development, whatever your initiative is, you need to make sure that you're responding to what faculty are telling you needs to be addressed and really, really making that clear. So we did a lot of college-specific visits. For those of you who have been in this world for a while, you know that there are a lot of urban myths around SACs and assessment, and we heard some pop up during this time. So we decided that we were going to visit each college, and the faculty committee, the faculty design team, they all came from colleges. They led these visits and they structured them. So some people chose an ice cream social, some people chose lunch, some people chose chocolate and cheese at the end of the day. Each one was slightly different. And the idea was we were going to come in, we were going to say, okay, SACS is not telling us what to do. We have the ability to structure this. We can do our own thing. It just has to improve student learning. That was one of the myths, that SACS was telling us to do this. And the other piece was that, oh, this will never happen. Well, it has to happen, right? For those of you who are familiar, this has to be done, and then we have to report it in 5 years. So those were the urban myths we kind of squashed a little bit. And then the faculty member who was on our design team would lead a conversation of, okay, we need to improve student writing. What deficiencies are you seeing, and how would you respond to, what would you need in a workshop? What tools do you need in a classroom? So those kinds of things, facilitating a conversation of what deficiencies are you seeing beyond grammar and syntax, and what tools do you need to help yourself in the classroom. So again, listening to faculty and responding to their needs. That's the biggest lesson I learned out of this whole thing, really listening to people and responding to their needs. That goes a long way when you said, yes, I hear you and I'm going to give you the tools to help you. So now we're kind of moving into the assessment stage. So the design team developed the structure, had the research, had the workshop structure. On the assessment side, we really kind of trailed everything because we needed some of those components in place. But we had a faculty assessment subcommittee, and it was a short-term commitment. And what they did was they developed the assessment and evaluation model for the QEP. So they developed how we were going to assess student learning and how we were going to evaluate the QEP. They created the student learning outcomes. We just had this topic of writing. And we heard things like students can't synthesize, they just give me an annotated bibliography, or students can't reason, or they cannot analyze. Well, we developed our student learning outcomes around those tenets, right? Students will be able to state a problem, question, or topic, synthesize information, integrate from multiple sources, reflect upon what is learned. So we were really listening to what is the issue, and our student learning outcomes came from what is the issue. Then they helped us develop a rubric, and we actually started with the AAC&U rubrics. Again, I told you there's no plagiarism in assessment. So we pretty much plagiarized most of those rubrics. However, what we ended up doing is we ended up combining 3 rubrics into one. We used the written communication, the critical thinking, and the I believe the reasoning. I don't know, I think there's a third rubric that we used, and we combined them into one rubric to assess our learning outcomes that we created. And then, like any good assessment person, we've got to pilot test it, right? So we had the faculty assessment committee bring papers from their classes to see if this rubric would work, because we had to figure out across disciplines too. We know what synthesis and analysis and researching a topic looks like in biology, but what does it look like in philosophy? And what does it look like in art? And what does it look like in criminal justice? So we had to honor each discipline and make sure that our student learning outcomes were available to each discipline. They could meet those outcomes, and then the rubric also honored each discipline's content expertise. So we had to be careful there. So we brought artifacts. We had 84 papers from 5 colleges across the institution, and our faculty, 14 faculty, read and rated those artifacts on the rubric that they developed and the student learning outcomes that they developed. Remember, I also want to note it here, there were 2 assessment people on this subcommittee, so these outcomes in the rubric were always guided by assessment people, but it was developed by faculty. It was ultimately proposed by faculty. So we pilot tested the rubric, we made some tweaks to it, and here's just an example of kind of our model for assessing faculty's use of best practices. I said there was an evaluation and an assessment model. We had 2 what we're calling treatments. That's not actually a great term, but the most easy term for people to glom onto. So prior to faculty either participating in our workshop or submitting an action project, which is a mini grant, we would collect syllabi. We would ask them questions from the Consortium for the Study of Writing about writing best practices. Then they would go through the workshop, or they would implement their action project, whatever that was. Some people have overhauled curriculum. Some people have brought in a speaker for the action project. It varies. Some people have turned their whole curriculum, had scaffold writing across the curriculum. So it just really varies on department, and this gives programs the freedom to do whatever they want. The action projects are mini grants that programs can get up to $20,000 to do something, and typically their home department also matches or at least puts in some extra resources as well. Workshops are just what they are. Faculty learn and develop best practices to enhance writing. It's a 30-hour workshop that faculty participate in. So they go through these treatments, for lack of a better word, and then we collect information after the fact. So we look at their revised syllabi. We re-ask them the Consortium for the Study of Writing questions, and we see the changes to faculty. So those kinds of things really show us what faculty have learned and what they've changed as a result of these two initiatives. But the focus of the QEP is really to improve student learning. So this is a similar model, but it's really focused on student learning. So prior to faculty entering a workshop or implementing their action project, we ask them to submit artifacts from a course they're currently teaching, or from something that they're going to change in the action project. So, and then we ask their students the same set of questions, but they're student focused instead of faculty focused. And we collect that information. Then the faculty go through the workshop or implement their action project. Then we collect the artifacts after the faculty have gone through the workshop and changed their course, or after they've implemented their action project and changed the curriculum or brought in a speaker or done something differently within the degree program. So we have a nice pre and post assessment here of actual student learning. We collect student written artifacts prior to faculty changing something, prior to them learning how to implement best practices, and then we collect artifacts after the change, and we see improvement in student learning there. And I'll actually at the end show you some data of where we're at on some of our learning outcomes. So assessment is ongoing, right? But it needs to be authentic and direct. That's why we're using student artifacts. We cannot use the survey questions as a proxy for student learning. So you really have to think about the logistics of how you're going to assess student learning and how you get direct and authentic. And authentic really refers to having students demonstrate something. So you don't really ask them their perceptions, you ask them to demonstrate something. So you've got to see what they're doing, they've got to demonstrate their knowledge, skills, or abilities. Then what we do with this, just to give you a little insight, we call our assessment of QEP, and actually Gen Ed as well, we call it an assessment summit. And at the end of the semester after commencement, we gather faculty for 2 days to read and rate all of these artifacts. We have 2 separate groups. We have a pre-group, you know, the artifacts that were collected pre-treatment, and post-artifact group, the artifacts that were collected post-treatment. And faculty read and rate online. We have an online rubric. All of our artifacts are posted online. We sit in a computer lab and they do this. And they get $750 for those 2 days. At the beginning of the session, we calibrate them. We discuss what the rubric means. We have common definitions. We look at exemplars to make sure everybody's reading and rating similarly. And then at the end of the 2 days, we ask them what's their recommendation for improvement. So essentially, the recommendations not only come from the data, but they come from faculty. It's not assessment people making the recommendations. It's the faculty making the recommendations. The last piece is the indirect assessment, the counts, the easy stuff. I can tell you how many students have been impacted. I can tell you how many faculty have gone through these workshops or action projects. We have surveys. We've done focus groups, syllabi reviews. So these are kind of the easy, low-hanging fruit that you can just grab quickly. So when you structure your assessment of the QEP, you need to think about all levels, the authentic direct assessment, but also the indirect assessment as well. And then this is just a quick timeline. And as I said, in the summer of 2011, we pilot tested the rubric. In year 0, while actually our QEP evaluator, while our SACS team was on campus, we pilot tested the first faculty workshop. And in fact, our evaluator asked us, how do we know faculty would sign up for the workshop? And we said, well, we can show you 25 that are currently in the workshop, and we had a waiting list of 70 at the time. And so we were able to say, yeah, there's a need for this. So we were pilot testing the workshop. So we had 1-minute assessments, we had the pre and post survey, we had the assessment of student learning rubric that I talked about, and we had the counts. That was in year 0. By the time year one came around, we did more formative and summative assessment, really thinking about, we had been approved and we really wanted to move forward with some of our assessment ideas, because in year zero we had not been approved and we did not want to we didn't even know if this was going to work. So we didn't want to do everything in the first year. By the time year two came around, we started to change our workshops. We used the data and from our assessment summit, but also did a curriculum map and changed the workshops a bit. We realized that reflection was very low, and when we looked at our workshops, we weren't teaching faculty how to teach reflection. So that was one of the eye-opening things. We didn't start the action projects until year two. We did not want to put everything in year one. The weight of everything is too much in the first year. So you really want to think about how you step in certain things. And then the second year is when we collected pre and post assessment. We did not do this year one. We only did post assessment. And so the logistics of that were just enormous, and we didn't know how this was going to work. But by year two, we really understood how to collect the pre-artifacts and the post-artifacts. And then moving on to year three, we added the syllabi reviews. So again, not everything happened in the first year. And in fact, we're starting year four, actually ending up year four, getting ready to start year five this summer. So I just want to talk a little bit about sustaining the momentum here. We hired a QEP director in the summer of 2012, and we literally handed her that 100-page QEP document and said, okay, here's your job description. And so she implemented what was approved by SACs. She created an advisory board. She added faculty as facilitators of the workshop, which I thought was brilliant, from different disciplines. They didn't come from English. They came from nursing. They came from human movement science, exercise science. They came from education. Really, really biology, really, really smart to add different faculty to teach other faculty. Again, we continue to engage faculty in assessing the workshop so they know the data, they know how students are performing. And we have our advisory board actually select who will get the $20,000 to implement an action project. And our QEP director also sends out weekly writing tips, and she makes them timely, beginning of semester, middle semester, end of the semester, kind of what are the things that people are focused on during those times of the year. And then lastly, she just recently, last year I believe, created a faculty writing studio. You can actually go online to that Wix site and see it. Continue to engage faculty in assessment of QEP. And she's actually expanded now. She's done some college or department specific workshops. So our College of Education, College of Business, they really wanted to have a focus workshop, and she's done that as well. So again, engaging the community, responding to their needs. What is it that they need and how can you respond? So again, when you're thinking about implementing this change, really think about what faculty value. And the biggest thing is responding to their needs, but also noting that they are valued. And we gave, small stipends in the beginning for faculty work, $100, $500 here and there. You may not be able to do that, but providing food, thank yous are free. A lot of times we copied a dean or a provost when we wanted to thank a faculty member. So you really have to leverage what faculty value and then respond to their needs. And when you're engaging with faculty, get them involved in solving the problem. Okay, writing is an issue. Now, what are the tools you need to fix that? So not only having them identify the pain, but also taking responsibility for also addressing that pain as well. And honoring not only disciplines but the history of the institution, and trying to look forward to the future as well. Embracing resistance and discomfort, it will happen, and always, it's not about assessment, it's about student learning. So always listen to faculty, reflect, and then challenge, okay, you don't like this, help us fix it. Some lessons learned: get started early, but not too early. Remember, we started in August of 2010, our QEP report was due in February of 12. So, 18 months or so. Think about ways to build faculty buy-in at all points of developing and implementing the QEP. Bring in your assessment professionals. Also, I should note here, your faculty development people. They are very, very important to this initiative. So they should not necessarily be leading this. This should be faculty-led. However, your assessment professionals and your faculty development professionals can give the structure to your initiative. Multiple forms of assessment, so we talked about direct and indirect, and incrementally build the QEP over 3 to 5 years. You saw that in year 1, we did not put in all of our stuff in year 1. By year 3, we had the majority of our initiatives implemented, but it took us a couple of years to really get going and have all of our initiatives fully implemented. And I always say, what is a 5th-year report? It's 5 one-year reports. So basically, report out on the progress of your QEP each year. It doesn't have to be a 20-page report. Ramika does, a quick 3-page report about counts and assessment of student learning and anything else that has gone on during the year. So it's a really quick report. So right now, actually, she's our 5th-year report is due in March of 18, and she is compiling all of those one-year reports into a 5th-year report. So she already has the data. She just needs to kind of structure it a little bit differently. And then I just want to say, I did talk a little bit about assessment. We are very proud of our initiative. To date, we have 244 faculty participating in workshops. We have about 800, I told you about 1,300 full-time and part-time faculty at the institution. We have about 800 of those that are full-time. So I think that we have a really nice participation rate. 27 different academic programs have been awarded $20,000 to make a curriculum change, which is huge. And this is the one that always gets me. 14,000 students have been impacted since we started this in 2012, spring of 2012, and I think that is incredible. Just to show you what assessment data can look like in pre to post assessment, our outcomes are down at the bottom, stating a problem, identifying sources, synthesizing information. And these are the exceeds and meets ratings on our rubric. And you can see when you structure assessment this way, you can see change and you can document improvement in student learning. So from 2013 to 2015, we actually see improvements in 5 of the 6 outcomes. I am not a writing expert, but I am told stating a problem is something that's taught early in a student's career in grade school, and we are trying to get them to go deeper with that. So we've gone a little bit backwards in our writing there, but other than that, you can see improvements in all 5 areas. So I just want to show you that if you think about all this on the front end, these are the kind of data you can present, and this is impact, right? This is demonstrating where those resources are going, but also the good that you're doing for students. So I will leave it there, and I think there are some questions, or maybe some questions that I can answer, and I know that also too Amber has a few things she wants to say.
Thank you, Tish. That was really informative and helpful. I know it was a lot of information for you to shrink down into less than 30 slides, and you really kept the things that I think are actionable for people. That was great. I was nodding the whole time. It was really good. We have a couple of questions so far. If you want to ask a question, it is on your GoToMeeting control panel, and there's a little question area, and you can type it in. Unfortunately, the way the GoToMeeting works, we can't have all of us talking at once because there's just too many of us, but you can type it in and I will be able to ask it so that we can get you an answer. So if you have a question, please go ahead and put it in there. The first one that I have is, are you aware that the SAC's QEP standard is about to change? It looks like there is no longer a requirement for the broad-based involvement of constituencies, but rather it emerges from ongoing comprehensive planning and evaluation processes. The focus could be on student learning or student success. What are your thoughts on that change?
Yeah, so I am aware of that. I think one of the heartaches was that, getting that broad-based involvement, and that's a squishy term. What really is broad-based involvement? 5 faculty, 100 faculty? What does that mean? Um, I personally, I am a champion of student success. My thought on that is that student success really comes from student learning. And that can be done different. Student learning can be decision making. Student learning can be career development too. There's all different ways you can define student learning. So you could bring in advising and all of that. High impact practices really promote student learning. Diversity and inclusion type student learning measures would be nice. So I am aware of that change. I still think that you need to involve the community if you want buy-in, right? So whether or not SACS tells me I need broad-based involvement, to sustain an effort like this over 5 years, you need broad-based involvement, period. Otherwise, this is just not going to fly, and it's going to be a lot of resources for not a lot of payoff.
Mm-hmm. Next question. Excuse me. What was the total budget allocated for your QEP?
And that is public information. If you went on our website, you would actually see the budget document. I believe it was over 5 years, under $400,000 over 5 years.
How did you disinvite those who were in the early development?
We said thank you. We've selected our topic, and we'd like to add content experts. So it was never negative. I just finished a book called Positive Academic Leadership, and he does actually talk about addressing the negativity. So it's more focusing on the positive. Thank you for the service you have done. And we were always up front. When we formed the team, we always said at the end of January we will think about what this team needs to look like in the next stage. So we were always open about that, so it wasn't a surprise to anybody. Mm-hmm. Transparency is the biggest thing with that.
What role did the library play, and or how was the library used in the development, implementation, and evaluation of the QEP?
Yeah, they were pretty awesome. I love librarians. And so one sat on our committee. Actually, she sat on the whole thing. She was on the development stage and the implementation stage. And she helped with research. At one point, somebody asked about pedagogy journals and disciplines, and the next meeting she had 4 pages of all the disciplines that had pedagogy journals. Like, it was amazing.
That's great.
So I definitely encourage you to do that. They're great researchers. They can tie in a lot of information quickly for you, and really add to your efforts.
What ways can staff support the QEP assessment process alongside or in support of faculty?
So that's a great question. On our team, we had at the time the director of academic enhancement or academic initiatives, and she was already thinking about student workshops or tutoring services that could be provided to students in support of the QEP. And so while that was not in our QEP plan per se and not budgeted, she was already thinking about her office and how they can support students in this effort, which I really enjoyed, because not the burden shouldn't always be on faculty. There's in and out of the classroom learning, right? Mm-hmm. And so your student affairs professionals, your advisors, they have a big role in this, but but remember, your QEP has to be focused, and you don't have a $4 million budget. So really think about what you need to budget for and what faculty can do, and then think about other areas in the university and how they can support this effort.
Does the budget include the QEP director?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and again, the line item is on the website. If you want to go to that website, it's in there.
Apart from asking what is your pain, how else have you successfully languaged the question to your faculty of which areas of student learning need improvement?
What do you wish students would do? Or what was one recently? I went to an assignment design workshop. What are you not getting from your students that you wish you could? Mm-hmm.
They're all good ones. And this is the last one I have right now. What was the length of employment stated in the QEP director's job description? In other words, will this person leave after the 5th year report or continue with the planning the next one?
Absolutely not. So she won't. So if I have my, she reports to me right now. So if I had my way, she would not leave. I actually see her. She has become a faculty development person. She has expertise in English. She's actually a poet, but she has now become our faculty development content expert. And so for the next QEP, we're going to use the same structure, the faculty development workshops, but put a different student learning outcome on top of it. So instead of writing, it might be quantitative literacy, it might be research, it might be ethics, whatever the community says. But I see her leading this effort long term.
Wonderful. Okay, really the last one. What do you think will happen with this project after the 5 years is completed?
It's already been embedded in the culture. So the way that ours has worked right now, maybe not the action projects because those are expensive, but the workshops themselves have already been embedded in the culture. And in fact, we did a pilot test and did the workshops with capstone courses. And so there's already a commitment to continue this faculty development initiative. We'll just change the topic.
Great. Thank you so much for a very informative and useful presentation. I know I really enjoyed it, and I think everyone else did too. Before we move on to the next thing, unless Tish, do you have anything else you wanted to say?
I don't. I just want to note that that last thing. I mean, you cannot get away from these data. So if somebody is worried that this won't continue or somebody's looking at budget cuts, this is the heart of it. You're improving student learning, and I can justify the resources, and a lot of people can justify the resources for continuing the project. So that's why your assessment plan is very, very important.
Really good questions too. Thank you to everybody for engaging that way. We really appreciate that, and thank you everyone for coming. What I would like to just remind you and request is when you do close out of the session, it will prompt you to take a survey. If you can't do it right now, you will also get an email. Again, that feedback is about today's session, but also about future sessions that you might like to see. And it really helps me and the team here plan things that are helpful and useful to our colleagues, our higher education community here. If you would like to have a brief, a very short, I'm thinking 5 to 10 minute overview of our software, I'm just going to walk through that quickly. And I will show you at the end, if you're interested in more information, how you can get in touch with us.